Good afternoon. My name is Christoph de Hechte. I'm the director of the festival. Nadia Tenstedt asked me to introduce this program, a case study curated by our friends of DOK Days UA in Kiev. Thank you, Victoria, and everyone involved for being here and bringing this. Zane Balchus will moderate this talk with Lusy Kon from BBC Storyville and Igor Savichenko from Babylon 13 in Ukraine, and we'll talk about how to co-finance Ukrainian films modeled on this one case of One Day in Ukraine. And without further ado, I'll ask everyone on stage, thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Christoph, for the introduction. So I am going to be moderating today's talk. My name is Zane, and today's topic, as you see from the presentation's title, is the film One Day in Ukraine, which we'll be discussing today with producer Ігор Савиченко and a commissioner from BBC Storyville, Люсі Кон. The title of the film already, it shows us the main focus of the film. It is one day, and the film happens during one day in Kiev. It is on 14th of March 2022, or as also in the film's credit, as it says, it is 2,944th day of the war. And at this particular moment of the film, we see the day when Russian troops are outside Kiev, and there is a feeling of imminent danger and tension. We see different characters who either try and go around their daily routines, or quite the opposite, who are part of the fighter movement. We will see shortly more of the film and the feeling it brings up in the trailer. And the film is directed by Volodymyr Tihий, together with collective Babylon 13, and the collective was formed at the end of 2013, and the filmmakers, independent filmmakers, they have documented the events in Ukraine since then, and they also have a YouTube channel where it's possible to watch more than 300 different length films about the current history of Ukraine. And before we go into the trailer, just a few sentences about our speakers today. So Lucy is an award-winning producer with a range of different experiences through her career. And she has been a commissioner, an executive producer, head of departments, and now, since the January, she's a commissioning editor at BBC Storyville. And Igor is a producer, also involved in very many productions throughout his career in filmmaking, and also one of the founding members of Babylon 13. And before we start discussing the film, let's watch the trailer. So I will start with my first question to Igor. Could you please tell us first a little bit more about actually shooting the film, and was it initially an idea already from the start that it's going to be a feature film, a feature-length film, which is framed chronologically within one day? What was the idea and thoughts for this production?
So let's say when we gathered again, when the invasion started, it was the idea to create short films, but also it was the idea to create something big like a feature film. And initial idea came to the wife of the director, so to connect everything around one hero who is a model and pop singer in Ukraine, who started to cook on the kitchen and to feed territorial defense in Kyiv. But after this, it's grown up a bit. I mean, it became more wider. We started to chase about 6 of different characters, even 7. So the 7th we didn't include into the film. And we just decided to take this day, which is 14th of March, which is the day of Ukrainian volunteers. And it was altogether 12 DOPs. So, but some, like for example, Yuri Gruzinov, we took only one small piece. But mostly, let's say, it was 7 of most, let's say, of cameramen who were leading of their groups. And we did it in one day. So we immediately, in several days, we uploaded the whole materials to Poland, because Kyiv was more or less surrounded, and we didn't know for how long the internet will be okay. And so we started editing quite soon, and by the end, I guess, of March, we got first cut, and by the 20th or 25th of April, we were ready with the cut to show it to the festival. And thanks to DOK Days, they connected us to Sheffield very fast. And Sheffield agreed to take the film. And so after they agreed, we had only 3 weeks to finish the film. And with documentary, it's quite difficult, because, you know, something the quality of sound and the quality of picture is not like Alexa and professional sound recorders, so we had to work on it quite fast and quite good. So we united a lot of people in Kyiv and in Warsaw. We were stabilizing different type of cameras. 3 sound mixers, very professional sound mixers, were working at the same time. They split the film for 3 different pieces. And finally, we made our premiere in June in Sheffield.
And now I get to the question to Lucy. At which point then BBC Storyville comes in?
Hello. Quite late, actually, I think. Well, I know, quite late. Before our little team from Storyville went to Sheffield, obviously before any festival you get the programme. I had a very strong feeling that we should do something in the season that started in the autumn. So it started a couple of months ago now. September. I can't remember anything about the day of the week, I'm afraid. So I really wanted that in the autumn season that we would go on air with a film about Ukraine. And I saw in the programme, there were a few films about Ukraine in the programme, saw Igor's film, thought it sounded really, really interesting. Knowing a little bit about festivals, I'm not an expert still, I'm relatively new to Storyville, thought the best thing to do was to get hold of Igor before the festival. So I sent him a random email, having found his email address online. My background is in journalism. And was gobsmacked, actually, that he sent me a reply really quickly. And he was in Kyiv, and he replied, he sent me the film, I watched the film, I thought we need this film. We made a plan to meet in Sheffield, and we sorted it out. It's like it was just for me, it was a no-brainer. It was really, really important that we. I mean, I'm aware that there are lots of people around the BBC who are making films at this moment and series that are going to go out for the first anniversary of the invasion. They're not made by Ukrainians, they're not led by Ukrainians. There are a couple of projects that involve Ukrainians, but I felt like as Storyville, we needed to have a film, and I think it's really important that everyone actually has films where we allow Ukrainians to tell their own stories. And that's what this is, and I think it gives you really extraordinary insight into what war is like, kind of the reality. Like the film it's not kind of like a fast action film, but that's the reality of war. Anyway, it was. I'm so pleased that we made that initial, and we've had lots of conversations since, and there were a few things that we had to iron out. One made me smile when I saw it on the trailer just there, which was the looters with the potatoes in their mouths. It didn't make me smile. I mean, it did. It was just, we had to have conversations about what was okay to put on the BBC because of our rules. But anyway, I'll be quiet now and let you ask a question. Sorry.
No, I mean, maybe you can just elaborate a little bit on this, what you just mentioned, that there were some like issues you had to kind of maybe negotiate about, or what you, as you know, that there are rules which what you can show and what you can't show. Can you maybe just go a little bit more in detail?
So that's really difficult because as a broadcaster, it's not. I mean, it feels really wrong in this environment to start telling filmmakers what they can and can't do. But it's going. We go out in. It doesn't matter what time we go out, but actually Storyville it's broadcast at 9 p.m. on a weekday night, which is prime time, so it's a really good slot. And it also sits on the iPlayer. Everything sits on the BBC iPlayer, which is really where we're trying to grow our audience. And even with a warning beforehand, which is what we have to do quite often to tell people that they might find some of the scenes upsetting, and obviously for a film about the war, that would be the case. But we still have to follow because it's not just because we're a public service broadcaster, it's the rules of broadcasting in the UK, and I'm sure they're the same in other countries. And one thing that we're not allowed to show, there are a few things. One is we're not allowed to show the point of death. That wasn't an issue on this film, but it's just something that keeps coming up. And filmmakers get really upset about it, and it's just like, we just aren't allowed to show it. And we're not allowed to show torture. And obviously this scene where there were looters, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, maybe they're Russians. Just when I started to watch it, there's a guy lying on top of somebody who's dressed all in black, and I made an assumption as I started seeing that scene that this is a Russian, that they've captured a Russian. And then it becomes clear that actually it's not a Russian, that it's looters, and this image ended up being something that went viral, really, didn't it, at the time, earlier in the year, when these looters were captured. They were tied to lampposts using cling film. They had their pants were pulled down, and they had potatoes in their mouths, and it's quite shocking. And Igor has a different. It'd be interesting to, because Igor said to me, it's a joke, and I'm like, I just don't think people in the UK are going to think it's funny, and we just can't show it. So, but we didn't want to take it out, so we ended up coming to a compromise. There was a lot of toing and froing that we had to blur the pants area, the bottom of the guys' torsos. And we had to blur their faces so they couldn't be identified because it's humiliating. And whilst I completely understand that in the scenario that you're in, it's part of the war, it's part of life, but we just could not put that on the television. And I feel uncomfortable about having to editorialise, but I really wanted that film to go on the television, and it's the bigger story is more important, in my opinion, to get on screen and share with our audiences at home. So I'm really pleased that Igor agreed in the end. And I think we work well together. He might say differently. I should leave if he does.
No, it was funny discussion. So when we seated in Sheffield and we were discussing genitals, rations, tortures and so on, it was funny discussion, but in the end, so what was interesting is that our colleagues didn't understand a lot of humor inside the film, because it's a lot of humor inside, but for an audience, they are more concentrated on atrocities than on humor. So, but we have a lot of humor.
And maybe you can just also tell a little bit more about, in general, how you worked together when you like agreed that this will be a film which is also broadcast on Storyville. That how also you will frame it and how you will talk about it to the your audiences. Whether did you have any differences also in the way what you say? What is the film about, and what is its main message, or maybe you can just comment on that.
What's really good about this film, and it's something that's really important at the BBC, and I'm sure in other broadcasters, is that the title says what it is on the tin, if that makes sense to everyone. It's about One Day in Ukraine, as you said. So an audience will automatically know it's about One Day in Ukraine, so you don't need to explain too much. It was a challenge to get publicity for the film. It shouldn't have been, but unfortunately, in lots of ways, our Queen died a week before the film was about to go out, or 10 days. So when we knew earlier in the day, I'm sure you all did as well, that the Queen was going to die, and that there would be 10 days of mourning, and lots of BBC programmes were cancelled. And I was feeling slightly sick that we wouldn't be able to put the film out when we'd said. Luckily, the film came out the day after the national mourning ended, but that did still pose a major challenge for getting publicity, even though it's about the war, which is obviously a hugely important story. Even the day after the mourning ended, it was still a challenge. Igor went on BBC Radio to talk about it. He can explain how that was for him. I was hopeful that we would get more publicity, but like I said, unfortunately, we didn't. In ordinary times, when the Queen's not just died, then it would have been much easier to use the BBC News machine to get publicity. What we're doing today, actually, I'm hoping it's happening as I speak, is we're releasing a digital video. It's a few weeks after transmission, so it's a little bit irritating that it's taken a while to get the digital video together. But a digital video will go out at some point today on the BBC, they call it the master brand. So it's the main BBC social media account on Instagram and Twitter. And that has a very large following of millions of people. And hopefully that will be shared very widely. It's tagging Babylon 13 and Dasha, who's in the video. But our social media team have cut down the story of Dasha, so one day in her life, the life of a former model, and singer, who features very heavily in the film. And I think it's a really good video, but hopefully that will kind of give the film a new lease of life on the iPlayer as well. And we're very much, that's kind of a really big thing for us now. So yes, I know we've got the clip as well. But
yes, I think so. As we had already just spoken about the clip and the characters, so we could show you the clip now.
Вчера в магазине покупала продукты, подошли два дядьки, говорят: вы же Даша? Я говорю: да, не можно вам руку пожать? Нет. Внукам буду рассказывать. Чистила картошку, мне потом руки жали.
Ребят, я просто работаю на кухне, хотела вам сказать, может вам горячего принести? Каждый? Точно? Может вам носки теплые, что-то?
Ребята, здесь тебя... Катюня, забирайте Сережу, Катя, Сережа. Смотри, я тебе покажу сразу. Перчатки. Все.
Нельзя быть злым. Малыш.
Такие красивые у вас.
Это православие. Забрали с дома, с этого.
Блин, столько собак бегает красивых домашних. Иди, малыш, иди. Иди, иди. Самый страшный день сегодня. Да ну ты шо, Чича скопчал, мы убежали домой с особняка. Очень страшно.
Ребят, всем пока, до завтра.
Пока, до завтра. Окупанти підірвали частину боєприпасів біля енергоблоку Запорізької АЕС. Планують надалі здійснювати.
Она вернулась со Святошина, там такие какие-то перестрелки жесткие были.
Я сегодня с собаками шла, надо же приседать. Рвануло так, что мы приседали, собака зашла, залезла под унитаз.
Тут по сравнению с Святошином реально тихо. Я там шла, там люди уже походу привыкшие к этому.
Да, я Шулявку приезжал, там лежат просто
Да-да.
разорванные снаряды на обочине.
Да вот
лежит.
сейчас.
Лучше не читать.
Так
Так мы же проезжали. Ну, в смысле, я домой заезжала.
не видеть не получится.
Подруга, она куратор в Сириусе. Там уже их разберут. Там есть уже люди, которые этим занимаются, просто для переправы.
Сбрасывайте мне все. Короче, мне добавили в очень крупную группу. Тут очень много, где-то около 46 участников. И они прям очень быстро все находят. Вот еду, воду, помощь, пересылки. Так что скидывайте. Я буду вас... Все? Рабочий день окончен. Убежище.
And as you joined, Lucy, the film, also already like at the stage when it was like completed or almost completed, then and you obviously funded the film like during the production yourselves, the ones, the Babylon 13 who were involved there. Can you, what was your, like from this kind of practical and financial side, the kind of I don't know, help or agreement you could make together, or you did make together?
I'm not going to talk about the amounts of money that we spent on
not,
the film.
not specific numbers.
But, I think that Igor was, in terms of when we were talking about money, I think Igor would have done it for not, you would have given it to us for not very much at all. You just wanted it to get out there to audiences. You might disagree with me now, but I'm but it felt very important as well that we also paid a fair amount of money. But I mean, the thing that I just felt again watching that, and I know this was not your question, is just I feel very, very strongly that as a broadcaster, that we have to let people tell their own stories. And you know, Storyville is a strand it's an international strand. We do some films about things in the UK, people in the UK, issues, stories in the UK, but we need to let people from all over the world tell their own stories. And it's hugely important. So with this film, it was an acquisition after the event, but we're just as up for, and it's something I wanted to raise in some of the sessions that I've been listening to earlier today, we're just as up for commissioning films from, you know, if it's just the gem of an idea in your head, and Igor and I are talking about some other ideas at the moment, to, you know, coming in after you maybe shot a little bit, you've either, you know, you developed the idea, you haven't developed the idea, but you've got an idea, or you're very nearly finished and you want us to come in then. We can come in at all different stages. For me, it's most exciting as somebody who's made stuff during her career to come in as early as possible, because then we can have creative input. But when a film's a good film and an important story, we'll come in the way that we did on this, and we'll do it quickly. Yeah, we're super keen to do more of stories like this that matter so much.
So, like Lucy said, it was not about the money, so we created the film without any money included. What we usually do, we just gather our resources and we shoot. And after we received the acquisition amount from BBC, we just shared it between the team. So it depends of who did what. So, and even the translators of subtitles, they got some money. So we just had sort of percentage of whatever. So we got our budget. So we compared it with the amount what we got, and we shared it in more or less, let's say, democratic way in between our group. But like Lucy said, the idea was to go to the as wide audience as possible. So this is why the amount wasn't so important for us. But we were discussing one amount and, let's say, between one amount and another amount, when we came to the signing of agreement, they came up with the maximum. So we didn't trade. So it was done like this, and very, very fast, extremely fast. I don't even remember how fast we signed the agreement, but it was maybe
just a week or two. It wasn't long.
Sort of.
If you want something, you want something. You know, and I don't believe in messing people around. It's like, it's really clear. And there were a few films at Sheffield that were really clearly we had to take. There was a brilliant one about And Still I Sing from Afghanistan as well. It's just like, let's just do it. We don't need to mess around.
Because I think also that there is like 3 months before actually shooting the film until it premieres, or slightly over 3 months, and then there is also again like another 3 months when the film goes on air on BBC. So I thought that it's really, is it relatively fast track, or how would you say about that?
It's fast. I mean, it must be. I'm sure for other people in the room would agree it's fast. But it's urgent as well, so you have to be fast. So we have a few films in production at the moment that are not that fast, but we've got people filming now, films that will be on air in the early spring next year, and another one that will be on air in the summer next year. And I'm really excited that we're going to be able to do that, because when I started my job, I was told that these films will spend a year or 2 years in an edit, and I'm not used to that. And I understand why they might, but I think that that if you're, you know, lots of the stories that everyone wants to tell are really important, and it's really, for me, what matters is that audiences can see them. And there were conversations earlier today about, you know, strategies with putting your film out there and having a festival run, which of course I understand is important. But if we can try and put films out as soon as possible after the festival run, so that they feel as relevant as possible and they get the maximum amount of publicity, then that's great. That's what we want. We want people to see them, especially while they're relevant and what's happening in Ukraine. It couldn't be more urgent that people know what's happening. I mean, Igor was there yesterday, and you know, even more so, what's going on in Kyiv now is like it's happening. Well, it's your story. You know, I think it's amazing that Igor's here.
And what is also good for our films, that even after broadcast, festivals are still showing the film. So right now it's in Warsaw. It will be very soon in Montreal. It was today the screening in Taiwan, and it will be Zeneby and several more festivals on the way. So it's still on festival run after broadcast, which is very unusual, because after broadcast usually festival says no, but in our case we are going We are running out, and also it will be in Germany. It was yesterday in Berlin. It will be today in Berlin again, and it will be in Cottbus. So it's good that broadcast didn't interrupt the festival's road as well.
I think it's really important to take that kind of pragmatic approach, where one of the films, which has got nothing to do with anything to do with Ukraine, and it's a domestic story, which I think is mind-blowing, that we'll put out in early April next year, will have a TV. It will have a TV premiere, and then I really, really hope it will go into festivals, and it will go into the cinema in the US, because it's such an amazing story. And I just think people need to be flexible about that, because it's like, why should one rule out another? If I get an email about a project and someone says, oh, it needs to go out in France first, or it's just like, let's just make this work. We don't have to stick to what's happened in the past. We need to make it work for now and for this story and this film, and so that the audience get to see it.
And so this one collaboration is, like, we can say maybe it's behind you already. Do you have any plans to work together more in the coming months or coming years?
Oh, do you want me to answer that? So Igor's got another film he's trying to get us to buy into. I don't know at the moment whether we will or not, but we'll definitely talk about it. What I do know is that I'm very pleased that I've managed to persuade. Well, it wasn't a very difficult thing to persuade, so I'm not trying to sound like a triumphant. But obviously, the Eurovision Song Contest is happening in the UK in May. I think it's May the 13th. I'm not 100% certain. I was told a couple of different dates. It's either May the 13th or the Saturday night before. It's going to be in Liverpool, and the BBC is obviously broadcasting it because it can't be in Ukraine. But what I've managed to persuade my colleagues who are organising it to do is that there's going to be a Eurovision village in Liverpool and partner cities in Ukraine. And in the village and in the partner cities in the UK from Ukraine, there's going to be Storyville Live, and we're going to show Ukrainian films. And we will have a series of Ukrainian films on the iPlayer as well. And those will be films not just about the war, but about Ukrainian culture, because that's really important that we can showcase Ukrainian culture too. So I don't know what films will be in there, because this has just been, it hasn't been announced anywhere, so obviously keep it a secret. Oh, there's a camera over there. But I'm hopeful that will be another really good moment for us to be able to work together, or I've been trying to pick Igor's brain about loads of ideas about stuff as well, and get them for free.
Also, this year is the year of UK and Ukrainian culture, and for example, here at the Ukrainian Institute, they work together with British Council to create as much as possible of Ukrainian culture contest there, like it was, for example, in Edinburgh. I'm sorry for Edinburgh Film Festival.
I hope it will come back or survive somehow.
They decided not to continue the festival, which was 75 years ago. I
think they've gone into liquidation. So I think someone will. I really hope someone will save it.
It was a good blackmailing then. Okay, but anyway, so I hope that altogether, the real culture and Eurovision, which is more like TV culture, but altogether it will be great for connecting of also culture and, let's say, pop culture, which is not bad, but it's a bit different altogether.
Yes, and as unfortunately, as it happens, time really flies, and we will have to wrap up quite soon. Therefore, I wanted to also turn to the audience and see if you have any questions. But before you think about your questions, I will take the liberty, Thomas, I'm sorry, and ask also about what is... as Lucy was commenting that it's important to work with local teams to get the stories told from the local perspective. What is MDR's take on that? What would you have to say about that?
Hello everyone, I'm Thomas from the local broadcaster MDR here. Where should I sit down, right? First of all, thank you for sharing this story, and it really, I'm not saying it blew my mind, but it opened something for me in terms of how do we, what is our aim as a broadcaster, what is also our legacy, or what are we really have to do at the moment. So what we decided, so I have a feature-length documentary strand on the Sunday night, and we did some acquisitions from feature-length documentaries from the past. So we thought, like, okay, this is something that is also to support Ukrainian film industry and directors, and also getting their stories out. So there will be a Ukrainian film night at MDR in November, the whole night, all Ukrainian documentaries. I think this is something which we can do very easily, where we don't have to apply for extra money in the company, which really doesn't stress our budget too heavily. And I think it's really like representation, like who is telling whose story. I think this is something I would really like to raise awareness also in the broadcasting network ARD in Germany. So we have a panel tomorrow where there's a big ARD award given, and the high heads of ARD are here. And we will bring up this issue as well, because I do experience that we have a lot of programming also planned for the anniversary of the full-scale invasion in February. And then if you look at detailed at the programming or at the production side, I do experience the same, that this is a lot of like foreign teams coming to Ukraine, working with locals, of course, but the whole production team is like flying in, and also the production companies are from abroad. So I really think we should find ways to collaborate easily and faster. Since MDR has a very restricted budget for documentaries, I'm very happy to hear that also not always money is the biggest issue. It's more about the courage to grab something, to find a way, and to feel the urge and put it out in the world. So I feel highly encouraged here, and thank you for sharing your insight.
Thank you. I see we have a question. Diana?
Hi, thank you. I have two things. Firstly, I wanted to ask you what you think. I'm from Prague. I run a streaming platform, DOK Alliance Films, and I was very active with DOK Days also with sending film equipment help to Ukraine. And I experienced myself this unprecedented energy and strength in people making decisions they would never ever make before. And it was all made in this like really fast pace. And this, you know, like suddenly we all touched upon something really human in ourselves, and the system just kind of went somewhere, like it was marginalized, or like we stepped out of the system for some time. And I feel that this has changed again, and I just wanted to ask you what your opinion on this is. Like, has your experience from war somehow like help you maintain a change, and how this energy, how we can maintain this energy, or what we can take from this? Because for me, it was really an unprecedented experience, with people open to support sending money in just like 2 days, like sending a lot of money, like suddenly supporting with all the ways, and then like after 2, 3, 4 weeks, it was starting to disappear. So it's just a topic I'm really kind of touched personally by. And second question is more for Igor. What is happening now? Like, if you know about more filmmakers, what are they, if they're shooting, and what, if you know about some documentary filmmakers working on something specific, or what is actually the status of this, or the situation of documentary filmmakers in Ukraine now? Thank you very much.
So we continue shooting, and we made the second film. We made the film about also one day, but about Independence Day of Ukraine, and this is sort of 6 months of shift. And it's very visible if to watch one film after another. This shift which you mentioned, but it's 6 months, it's not several days. Yes, in the beginning we got a lot of support, and also from Czechish Audiovisual Producer Association we got a lot of equipment, and the last equipment I brought just something like 3 weeks ago for editing, and it's also, you know, something like development. In the beginning we got hard drives and cameras, and now we are editing stations and monitors to continue our work, so that's what we do. In general, you know, this is kind of experience to see what you see on the picture, but to see it in reality, and after this to try to tell this story to the world, it's quite difficult. I mean, to understand what people will get from the material with your voice, and I'm really thankful to BBC that they came to us, they picked our film, so with something like, and Lucy was quite detective because she sent me email not through Babylon 13 but through my main company, which is Directory Films, through the website, which came to spam, and somehow when I clean the spam I see the box from BBC, and first was it wow, but after this I read it looks like real BBC, so I replied, and it's completely different, for example, to Germans.
I'm not real BBC.
I sent film to MDR something like 3 weeks ago, and no signs. You know, even Austrians, they are much faster. So, and we signed the agreement in a week, so even if you will reply, maybe you will see the film in 5 years, or sort of this. So, but anyway, so what I mean is that I really thankful to BBC that they showed the film as it is. So they only blurred several, maybe up to 10 seconds of the film, which was very good. I mean, they took the artistic side. And after, I've been to London the day of transition, and the next day I was in Soho. And I was sitting in my friend's office, and I was waiting for the train to the airport to go to Kosovo. And friends of mine, they came. They didn't know that this film was created by our group, and they started to talk. And one of them was very, how to say, emotional, and another one, he's very cynical, and he was asking something like 5 times, how did you make art house to BBC? It's not possible. How did you make it? So it's good that they take the film as it is.
I think it's good we took the film as well. I'm really pleased. In terms of just answering your point about the timing, I mean, I'm relatively new to Storyville. I started in January, and I said before, my background, although I think a lot of people might go, ooh, her background's as a journalist, and so I started life as a baby, but a bit later I became a journalist, and worked in news, current affairs, and so prior to coming to Storyville, I was executive producer of a current affairs strand at the BBC called Panorama, where we were doing a film a week for about 40 weeks of the year, so it's fairly full on. And I'm used to when you know, you know. I just think, and you have to make quick decisions there, and sometimes you have to be, something enormous happens, like, you know, the pandemic. Obviously that took a while, but it just happens, and you have to go, right, we need something. Obviously, this is massively privileged doing Storyville because you can make proper films. I'm not saying, no offense to Panorama, I loved working there, but sometimes when you're doing something really quickly, it's not very filmic, or you can't film proper sequences. So it's just like, that's kind of like one of the things that hopefully I have another colleague back home called Emma, who's also working, who's the lead commissioning editor on Storyville, and we both feel very strongly that it's like I said, when you know, you know. And why would you mess around? Why would you mess anyone around? So if someone's not, we can only commission things, projects, when they've got 50% of the finance in place. But if we know that we want the project, we can give someone a letter of interest, a letter of intent. And hopefully that will help people to raise the money as well, and we can do everything that we can do to introduce people to other broadcasters or other financiers. But it's just like, if we know we want it, just get on and do it.
Okay, so we have time for one last question. And then if there are more questions, then you will just have to do it individually. But now let's hear the last question or comment from the audience.
To reiterate what you asked, could you elaborate a little bit more what the situation for the filmmaking community is in Ukraine right now? I mean, I know like quite a lot of filmmakers also have left the country. Are you getting, apart from yourself, you're obviously in business, but are other filmmakers also getting enough resources to continue to document what's going on in the long term? What's the general situation?
Most of Ukrainian filmmakers are in Ukraine, so I don't know about percentage, but more than half for sure. If to talk about Babylon 13, so it's not sort of something official. It's just a group of people who think in one way. So for sure we have something like entity and NGO and LTD, something for this. We are quite lucky because we are existing for more than 8 years and very well known in Europe, so this is why we started to receive a lot of grants, and it's enough for us to survive, let's say, for the moment. In general, we have huge support, for example, from German Film Academy, also from European Film Academy, so also Netflix, they provided the grant to Ukrainian Film Academy to split it in between Ukrainian filmmakers for development. Some programs in different national film bodies to support Ukrainian projects in priority, like for example in Poland. And all of those money are possible if you have it, if you in Ukraine, so just to have it in Ukraine, and the procedures to receive the support is, as for me, is very clear and very fast and very easy to get. So thanks to all of this support, many of Ukrainians are still in. If to talk about, for example, DOPs, they work for some international productions, which we have a lot as well in Ukraine. A lot of Ukrainian editors are involved. So Ukrainians abroad, they also somehow united, and I know, for example, about, it's also, I guess, from Germany, Crew United. It's the organization who gathered resumes and information about who is where in Europe, and they made sort of catalog of Ukrainian filmmakers, and they're trying to push Ukrainian FSADs, DOPs, actors into different projects. I've been to Hamburg something like 3 weeks ago, and there is a film or series, the film called Slava the Dog, and they have several Ukrainian actors, Ukrainian sound crew, and someone in Ukraine, cameraman, in camera department. So the support is huge, and it's quite transparent and quite easy to get it. So also, for example, how we travel, it's also sort of question. So because it helps us to understand the audience, it helps us to be in touch with our colleagues. So Ukrainian Institute, Ukrainian Film Academy, DOK Days, they received a lot of support for this, for travel, to cover travel and accommodation costs of Ukrainian filmmakers. So this is how we can go abroad. And also festivals, for example, like Leipzig Festival, they cover the cost of travel, which is unusually high for the moment because, for example, I have to cross the border by car. So I drove here from Kyiv by car. I spent 2 days for this. So, but we work, and it's huge amount of projects, and so some numbers. When it was the contest, which was supported by Netflix, they do not take any rights for materials. They just gave money as a grant. And it was more than 750 of applications. So it's about the amount of projects are in development in Ukraine. Most of those projects, about 6, maybe 100, are about the war. And this is emotions, feeling, and anthropology of what is going on in Ukraine. And this is the voice of Ukraine coming from Ukraine. It's not something like when you send some journalist to Ukraine and he watched some. It's now something like you went to Tate in London, you went to see the grave of the Queen, sorry for the Queen, and after this you see the picture of UK. So it's not like this. So it's coming from inside.
Can I just add, sorry, very quickly, just Igor mentioned the Ukrainian Institute, who we've, thanks to Igor, you probably don't realise it, but thanks to connections that Igor has introduced me to, we've been talking to the Ukrainian Institute, and they have gathered together an amazing list of all the projects that are happening now, and historic projects as well. So they're really good people to talk to and to help connect you. And I think actually because we ran Igor's film, I have now got lots of Ukrainian people contacting me and talking about their projects. So there's lots of really amazing projects that are in progress from Ukrainians, and this amazing back catalogue as well that people can draw on.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing the experience, and I think the message is clear that we just have to listen and hear and do what we can to help and show the films and in general contribute with our support to Ukraine. So thank you, Festival and DOK Days for initiating this event, and the festival for accommodating it, and thank you all for coming here in the room, and also those who are watching us online. So thank you, enjoy the festival, and have a nice evening.